And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee and their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. Genesis 17 verse 7. Even of the covenant which he made with Abraham, and of his oath unto Isaac, and hath confirmed the same to Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying, Unto thee will I give the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance. 1 Chronicles 16 verses 16 to 18. For I am the Lord, I change not, therefore ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. Malachi 3 verse 6.
A new paradigm has emerged, and it has shifted the minds of men to seek pure, unadulterated truth surrounding the true descendants of the so-called children of Israel. There is an unprecedented disclosure of knowledge that is unveiling all the secret agendas and the responsible coup who organized and funded it all. For nearly 2 millennia, the powers that be purposely altered the scriptures within the Bible to create a false ideology to advocate a modern European Jewish nation as the biblical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. None of our patriarchs were called Jews, but were Bantu, black and brown people who migrated to sub-Saharan Africa to flee Rome's persecution. In this study, we will uncover just how the world has been duped on an unfathomable scale. And because of this great deception, there is no consensus on who are the true descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, nor when and how the King of Glory will return to gather his chosen people. It is my intent to help our nation, the African diaspora abroad, the Bantu people, the Negroes, the true descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to not give up hope, but trust in the true God and his Messiah, not the gods of the Europeans. Our Creator has a name, and so does his Son. God, Lord, Savior, and Messiah are not names, but titles of a ruler, by hereditary right or preeminence to whom service and obedience are due. Just like there are many presidents, kings, princes, etc., what specific name is ruling? Why would the translators deliberately remove the Creator's original name? Because it will identify who are his chosen people and the everlasting covenant he has made with Adam and Eve, and ultimately the seed of Jacob.
But I cannot alter the covenant that has gone out of my mouth, else would I have brought thee back into the garden. 15. When, however, the covenant is fulfilled, then shall I show thee and thy seed mercy, and bring thee into a land of gladness, where there is neither sorrow nor suffering, but abiding joy and gladness, and light that never fails, and praises that never cease, and a beautiful garden that shall never pass away. Platt Jr., Rutherford H. The Forgotten Books of Eden, page 41. 6. O ye seed of Abraham his servant, ye children of Jacob his chosen. 7. He is the Lord our God, his judgments are in all the earth. 8. He hath remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations. 9. Which covenant he made with Abraham, and his oath unto Isaac. 10. And confirmed the same unto Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant. 11. Saying, Unto thee will I give the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance. Psalm 105 verses 6 to 11.
This covenant is the possession of the land of Canaan. Canaan is Africa, the land which flows with milk and honey, which is the wealth of its raw materials such as gold, diamonds, silver, rubber, uranium, petroleum, cobalt, all kinds of precious metals. The sons of Jacob were promised this land, but how can they take possession if they are scattered across the four corners of the earth? How can they occupy what was divinely ordained to them if the heathens have taken their land captive? We've been fighting for the promised land since eternity past. We never officially took complete possession of it to rule with our Creator and his Son. You see, the covenant not only covers the inheritance of the promised land, but it also includes a second Exodus. How can we, the Bantu, the Negro, the chosen seed, return to Africa unless there is a global migration? We are still scattered across the four corners of the earth. The finality of Esau's or the Edomites, or the European rulership over us, and the beginning of Jacob's reign was prophesied in the book of Esdras.
He said to me, "From Abraham to Isaac, because from him were born Jacob and Esau, for Jacob's hand held Esau's heel from the beginning. 9 For Esau is the end of this age, and Jacob is the beginning of the age that follows. 10 For the beginning of a man is his hand, and the end of a man is his heel. Between the heel and the hand seek for nothing else." Ezra. Books of Esdras 1 and 2.
This video is about a new revelation of a second Exodus, and to confirm the event is certain. In this teaching, it is important to note to the reader that first, he or she must research any information I provide before reading and listening to this segment of teaching. There are valuable works done by authors from several backgrounds who have explicitly proven it to be true for centuries. If one desires, they can visit the comment section of this video to find a list of readily available resources in an instant. This study will be divided into 3 basic explorations. The first Exodus. Second, the rapture theory versus the second Exodus. And third, the unveiling of how the second Exodus will happen in the near future. So, let's get started. The first Exodus took place when Jacob, a Bantu, dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. Famine had struck all the lands, and people abroad went to Egypt to buy grain, and Jacob's family traveled there as well. Grain was stored up at the command of Joseph, who was then ruling as the governor of Egypt. The children of Jacob migrated to Egypt at the time Joseph had become ruler in Pharaoh's court. Later, Joseph procured the land of Goshen for his family to dwell in as a haven from the famine. It is recorded in Scripture that at the time of his migration, Jacob's entire family was small. In fact, in the book of Exodus 1 and 5, it reads,
"And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already." Exodus 1 verses 1 to 5.
From the time Jacob and his family settled in Goshen until the time of a new ruling Egyptian pharaoh who did not acknowledge Joseph, the Bantu people had increased significantly in number. So much so that apparently their population was surpassing that of the Egyptians. This was a political, militarily, and economical threat for the new incoming pharaoh. To circumvent the empowerment of the Bantu people, this pharaoh imposed harsh sanctions on the populace by doubling their workload with rigor and abuse, to finally enslaving them without pay.
"And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass, that, when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor." Exodus 1 verses 9 to 13. "And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive." Exodus 1 verse 22.
Because of the cry of the children of Israel, the Most High hearkened to their plea by sending Moses back to Egypt. By the mighty hand of the Most High and his miraculous judgment that was performed on Egypt, Pharaoh finally freed the children of Israel under the leadership of Moses. It is at this time that Moses revealed to the children of Israel the Most High's sovereign plan and everlasting covenant.
And I have also established my covenant with them, to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their pilgrimage, wherein they were strangers. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians keep in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm, and with great judgments, and I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a God, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you in unto the land concerning the which I did swear to give it to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it you for an heritage. I am the Lord. Exodus 6 verses 4-8.
The land of Canaan is sub-Saharan Africa. It is the same land that the Most High promised to Abraham when he and Sarah left Egypt to go south. This land, south of Egypt, means he went further or deeper within the southern interior of Africa. If Abraham went south, how can the location of the state of Israel in the Middle East today be the Promised Land? I will create a video on this particular subject in the near future. Now let's discuss the number of years the children of Israel were in captivity in Egypt. It's been verified that the bondage of slavery amounted to less than 215 years, and not 430 years as recorded in most modern Bible translations. Understanding the number of years in bondage under the first Exodus is paramount. For a prophecy was given to Abraham regarding his seed being in bondage for 400 years. Most Christian doctrine teaches that the 400-year bondage happened already in the first Exodus when Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt. But this is not so. Let us take a view at two scriptures relating to the same prophecy, but are not in sync with the number of years Israel was in bondage in Egypt. For instance, in the books of Genesis and Exodus, there are scriptures to support this fact.
And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation, whom they shall serve, will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. Genesis 15 verses 12-14. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel, who dwelt in Egypt, was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. Exodus 12 verses 40-41.
Of course, some would speculate a conspiracy on my findings, but in this video, credit is given to a YouTuber named Nathan H83, who dissected the number of years of freedom from the number of years in bondage in a clear and concise manner. How long were the Israelites in Egypt? Let's take a moment to hear another witness.
How long were the Israelites in Egypt? In Exodus 12:40 it says, Now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. And so because of this, movies like the Ten Commandments will say things like this.
That's a hard dance you do, old man. We've been dancing it for 400 years.
400 years we have waited.
400 years in bondage, and today he won't move.
After 400 years of slavery.
And experts on the topic will say things like this.
The Israelites were there 430 years. We have the record in the Bible that tells about the Israelites going into Egypt and living there for 430 years.
But if you do the math, you'll find that this is not mathematically possible. It says in Exodus 12:40, it says, And the sojourning of the children of Israel while they sojourn in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan was 430 years. The Samaritan Pentateuch says the same thing. It says, "Now the sojourning of the children of Israel and of their fathers, which they had dwelt in the land of Canaan and in Egypt, was 430 years." Flavius Josephus says they left Egypt 430 years after our forefather Abraham came into Canaan, but 215 years only after Jacob removed into Egypt. Flavius Josephus is saying the exact same thing. He's saying they left Egypt 430 years since our forefather Abraham came into Canaan, but 215 years only since Jacob removed into Egypt. Flavius Josephus is saying the exact same thing. So why do modern translations say that the Israelites were in Egypt for 430 years when this is not mathematically possible? The reason why is because modern translations like the New King James, the NIV, the NASB, these are all translated from the Hebrew Masoretic text. But the Hebrew Masoretic text is not the original Hebrew text. The copy of the Masoretic text that most modern translations are translated from is called the Leningrad Codex, which was copied in the 11th century AD. But the Greek Septuagint was translated more than 1,000 years before that in 250 BC, which means that the Greek Septuagint would not have been translated from the Hebrew Masoretic, but rather it would have been translated from a much older copy of the Hebrew that's no longer around today. The Samaritan Pentateuch also predates the Masoretic text and would also have been translated from a much older copy of the Hebrew. Flavius Josephus was a 1st century Jewish historian. He lived long before the Masoretic text was copied, and Josephus had access to ancient Hebrew texts that have since been lost or destroyed. Paul the Apostle lived long before the Masoretic text was copied, and Paul knew Hebrew. In Acts 26, when Paul talks about his encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, he says that Jesus spoke to him in the Hebrew language, and Paul understood him. Paul knew Hebrew, and so Paul would also have studied from a much older copy of the Hebrew. And what Paul says in Galatians 3:16 and 17 is consistent with the Greek Septuagint, the Samaritan Pentateuch, and the writings of Flavius Josephus. Now the Bible says, "By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word shall be established." Well, we've got more than 2 or 3 witnesses here. We've got 4 witnesses all bearing witness that the original Hebrew text said that the Israelites will be in Egypt and Canaan for 430 years. But more than 1,000 years later, when the Hebrew Masoretic text was copied, the phrase "and Canaan" was dropped out of the text, and all of our Bibles are translated from this corrupted copy of the Hebrew. The New King James, the Old King James, the NIV, the NASB, the ESV. If you go to BibleGateway.com, you'll find there's 50 English translations of the Bible on this website, and every single one of them say that the Israelites were in Egypt for 430 years, which is incorrect and mathematically impossible. Every single one of these translations are inconsistent with the original Hebrew because they're all translated from the Hebrew Masoretic, and according to these 4 witnesses, the Masoretic text copied it incorrectly. As a matter of fact, these ages of Moses and his father and grandfather are recorded in the Masoretic text, and yet they only add up to 350 years maximum. So in that sense, there's even a 5th witness. The Masoretic bears witness against itself. And so the amount of time the Israelites were in Egypt was only 215 years. But the years of slavery was even less than that, because the Israelites did not become slaves until after Joseph and all that generation died, and then a new king arose who did not know Joseph. Well, Joseph was 30 years old when he entered Pharaoh's service. Then shortly after there were 7 years of abundance and then 7 years of famine. So it would appear that after the 7 years of abundance, Joseph would have been 37 years old. Then 2 years into the famine, when he was 39, that's when all of Israel arrived in Egypt. So based on the information given, it appears as if Joseph was 39 years old at the beginning of that 215 years. Then Joseph died at 110. So take 110 and subtract 39, and that equals 71, which means that for 71 years, the Israelites were in Egypt under Joseph's rule, and they were not slaves during those 71 years. So take the 215 years that the Israelites were in Egypt, subtract the 71 years that Joseph was in power, and that equals 144, which means that the Israelites were not slaves for any longer than 144 years maximum. Now Moses was 80 years old when they left Egypt, and they were already in slavery when Moses was born, which means that they could not have been slaves for any less than 80 years minimum. So take the 215 years that the Israelites were in Egypt, subtract the 71 years that Joseph was in power, subtract the 80 years of Moses' life, and that equals 64, which means that there were 64 years in between Joseph's death and Moses' birth. The Israelites became slaves sometime after Joseph died and sometime before Moses was born, sometime within that 64-year time period. Now let's just assume that the Israelites became slaves at exactly the midpoint in between Joseph's death and Moses' birth. That would be 32 years after Joseph died and 32 years before Moses was born. If this is the case, then that would mean that the Israelites were slaves for 112 years. And so the amount of time the Israelites were in slavery was probably about 112 years or so. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but definitely no more than a maximum of 144 and definitely no less than 80 years minimum. Whatever the case, the Israelites were definitely not slaves for nearly as long as the movies make it sound when they say,
400 years in bondage, and today he won't move.
The Israelites were not slaves for 400 years. They were only slaves for about 112 years or so, plus or minus 32 years.
Now that the 400-year prophecy is not applicable to the book of Exodus, let us lay it to rest and move forward to the next learning segment. Within this next study, a comprehensive analysis is conducted to clear up another misunderstanding about the term rapture and how this ideology is not biblical. Who created it? And why was it created?
For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 to 17.
The phrase caught up was taken as an interpretation to mean rapture, or dragged off, snatched, seized, or carry off. This holds that Christ will secretly remove all believers from earth before the 7-year tribulation period. Non-believers left behind will be tempted to follow the Antichrist, and those converting will be persecuted. This view of eschatology is referred to as dispensationalism, a form of futurism that considers various prophecies in the Bible as remaining unfulfilled and occurring in the future. These are ideologies the Europeans have created since the printing of the Bible. Each century, a renowned or so-called expert in biblical studies conjure up various beliefs and doctrines that are contrary to the original word of the Most High. Such hypocrisy causes confusion and erroneous interpretations of scriptures. This gave rise to Christian propaganda and the exportation of selling another version of the Most High's word for profit. But where did the idea of the rapture originate? Credit for its origin generally goes to John Nelson Darby, a 19th century theologian. There was also
postmillennialism,
which means Christ returns to establish the kingdom on earth after the 1,000 years, and
amillennialists,
which does not believe that the kingdom is coming at all. Both of these doctrines were taught in Darby's day. He labored to correct both false teachings and therefore created a third doctrine called
premillennialism.
He believed rightly that Jesus Christ would return to earth to establish and rule over the kingdom of God. But in his zeal for countering error, he added another, the rapture theory. He believed he understood a new truth, an idea that had not been taught in the history of Christendom. Later, Darby's pre-tribulation view of the rapture was then picked up by a man named C.I. Scofield, who taught the view in the footnotes of his Scofield Reference Bible, which was widely distributed in England and America. Both Darby and Scofield claimed that the day of Christ refers to the rapture and that the day of the Lord refers to the actual second coming, several years after the rapture. And so fast forward today, the rapture has become a multi-million-dollar social media marathon. The rapture was commercialized in 1970s by Hal Lindsey's writings, called The Late Great Planet Earth. We live in a time when most are content to get their knowledge from religious beliefs or secondhand unconfirmed sources, preferably through dramatic presentations, including stage, screen, and novels. But you cannot afford to neglect your personal responsibility to prove the truth. Those willing to take a careful look at the Bible will see that the rapture theory does not stand up to the scrutiny of the Most High's word, especially in the books of Isaiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Amos, and other Old Testament prophets. In the past 2 decades, Jim Jenkins and Tim LaHaye, authors of Left Behind fictional books and films, continues the work of Darby and Schofield. It was propagandized into a multi-billion-dollar movie business that was directed by the hidden hands of the Vatican. Yes, you heard me, the Vatican. Darby and Schofield were also agents of deception to be used to deceive not just the world, but especially the children of Israel who were throughout the diaspora. If we take careful notice, there's a pattern of fate depicted specifically in the Bible for the Bantu people. It does not involve a rapture, because this pattern cannot be seen in Israel's historical account throughout the entire scripture. Abraham was told his descendants would be in bondage for 400 years, but they will come out of it with great substance. We can clearly see that this fate of bondage occurred in Egypt lasted less than 215 years. Moses recorded Israel's first exodus and continued to manage the spirituality of his people up until he witnessed seeing the promised land before the time of his death. However, he explicitly predicted to Israel, though they finally made it to Canaan's land or the promised land, another bondage was inevitable in their future because they were such a stiff-necked people. Therefore, Moses makes a proclamation to Israel, the Bantu. He tells them to choose life, but if they continue to disobey the Most High, they will forfeit their blessings for the curses of Deuteronomy 28. When you understand the historical account of how the Most High delivers his children from captivity, you begin to see the fallacy in the rapture theory. The Most High's plans is still in effect until he finally brings his people to the promised land in Africa. Today, the tribes of Israel are scattered throughout the diaspora, which includes the Americas, Asia, Europe, Australia, the islands of the Caribbean, and beyond. The second Exodus is the end of Esau's or Edom's reign and the beginning of our righteous king and his chosen people to rule the world by the commandments of the Most High. Our king will rule from the New Jerusalem, which will be in South Africa. This is the promised land and everlasting covenant the Most High made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But scriptures show that the children of Israel suffered multiple captivities because of their disobedience to the laws and commandments of the Most High. Between the time our ancestors exited Egypt to all the way to the time of the Messiah, our prince, they failed to take complete possession of the promised land.
When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, set in the holy place, let him that readeth consider it. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to fetch anything out of his house. And he that is in the field, let not him return back to fetch his clothes. 15-18. And woe shall be to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray that your flight be not in the winter, either on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not from the beginning of the world to this time, nor shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. 19-23.
Here's another prophecy foretold by the Messiah as what will happen to Jerusalem and the house of Israel in the not-too-far future. In 70 AD, the Romans and the Christians destroyed the true Jerusalem location, which is in Africa. They began taking occupation while slaughtering the children of Israel. Why? To serve the Roman and Christian gods and goddesses of their pagan religion. This prophecy came true, and those who escaped fled northwest Africa. When the Romans took siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the children of Israel returned to these lands Abraham once tread. They migrated far east to west along the coastal plains in the north, and as far east to west along the coastal plains in the south, including the Congo of Central Africa. They were a people who always migrated whenever they rebelled against the Most High. However, the most populated area in which the Bantu of the children of Israel migrated to was West Africa. It is important to note that wherever location the children of Israel chose to inhabit, they established their kingdom's identity on that land, showing ownership. Thus, the city of Jerusalem was recognized in that region. This was an old tradition they held even in the Old Testament. This map was created in 1747 by English cartographer Emmanuel Bowen as part of a collection. He was a renowned map maker with a reputation for being accurate. Here on his map of Negro land, Africa, he notes the kingdom of Judah as the slave coast. There are other maps of antiquity which dates as far back as the 1400s on the Library of Congress website, which reveals just how long Israel inhabited these lands. The reason Judah fled into West Africa was to escape the invading Roman armies in the south, as depicted in Matthew 24. Yes, Rome at that time ruled the world, including parts of Africa. But take note on this map that there are three important kingdoms which were part of Negro land: the kingdom of Judah, the kingdom of Tambut or Timbuktu, and lastly, the kingdom of Meli or Mali. Mali was one of the richest kingdoms of Africa, and Mansa Musa was among the richest kings in the world who established Timbuktu. Though the children of Israel enjoyed many years of prosperity and wealth with this sophisticated empire, they began to entertain other religions and philosophies from other groups. Soon Christianity resurfaced with a new brand under the Roman papacy and its military crusaders. They had always kept close eye on the whereabouts of the children of Israel. It was as early as the 1300s Catholic priests began evangelizing parts of Africa. They were on a mission to persuade the Most High's people into renouncing their covenant with Him and make a new covenant with another God they thought was the Most High.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Deuteronomy 20 verses 3-4.
Their most dangerous weapon against the Bantu people or the children of Israel is to persuade them through false religion to serve another god made of wood and stone. And by doing so, they break the commandments of the Most High, which gives Rome the advantage to remain in power as rulers of this world. It was the religions of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and others the Vatican used to deceive the house of Israel to turn their backs on the Most High. This is where our ancestors rebelled with stiff neck, while only a remnant rejected it and fled to obey the commandments, laws, and ordinances of the Most High. For every time Israel sinned against the Most High to follow other religions, He will allow them to go into captivity. Hence, we were warned in prophecy that one last captivity will be far worse than all the previous ones. Unfortunately, the children of Israel, the Bantu, didn't take heed to the dire warning in Matthew 24. Christianity became the Bantu's religion and all of its doctrines and theories that are associated with it. It led them astray from worshiping the true Creator. It is at this time the great falling away occurred. This is why the Most High warned Abraham and Moses that another captivity for 400 years is yet to come. Just as it's noted in the Old Testament, Israel went into several captivities for serving other gods through pagan religions. However, none of these captivities lasted 400 years.
Woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, that sendeth ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the waters, saying, Go, ye swift messengers, to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden down, whose land the rivers have spoiled. Isaiah 18 verses 1 to 2.
But why would Rome continue their wicked mission to destroy the Most High's chosen people? No matter where the chosen elect or the Bantu people try to hide, Rome, Vatican can't seem to leave us alone, because they know the prophecy concerning their end as rulers of this world. Their enslavement by a people from afar who owned slave ships was a fulfillment of this prophecy. In our world, the Bantu family, we are seeking the Most High because we understand that our bondage of 400 years began with the transatlantic slave trade on the west coast of Africa. Then it journeyed to the seaports of the U.S., Brazil, Spain, Portugal, the Mediterranean islands, and other lands abroad. Remember, there was an Arabic Islam slave trade as well that lasted 1,400 years. However, the 400-year captivity of the transatlantic slave trade is the focus, and it is an important event that can be noted as the scattering of the 12 tribes of Israel across the four corners of the earth. It is Deuteronomy 28 prophecy coming full circle in the most horrid and unspeakable inhumane exploitation of a people in world history. Has it been 400 years since we, the Negro, the Bantu, been in slavery? Yes. In the United States, that period of captivity started on the west coast of Africa between the 1500s and the 1900s AD. One thing is for sure, we may not have the physical iron shackles around our feet and a yoke of iron around our necks anymore, but on a spiritual level, these things still hold us in bondage. And yet still some form of modern day slavery still exists in the promised land. However, the Most High will gather us after the time of the Gentiles have been fulfilled.
For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Luke 21 verses 22 to 24. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the world unto the other, and that thou shalt serve other gods, which thou hast not known, nor thy fathers, even wood and stone. Deuteronomy 28 verse 64. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given the child for the harlot, and sold the girl for wine, that they might drink. Joel 3 verse 3. Therefore thou shalt serve thine enemies which the Lord shall send upon thee, in hunger and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in need of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. Deuteronomy 28 verse 48.
There's nowhere in human history this tragedy has happened to another group of people of such massive scale. Not even the so-called modern-day European Jews, the Khazars, the same Pharisees and Sadducees during the time of the Messiah. Even they don't have the authority to assume our identity, for they have no history nor DNA proof to verify their identity except to claim that they're the people of the book. Even our Bantu Savior questioned their identity by asking if their seed had ever been enslaved.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, We be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, Ye shall be made free? John 8 verses 32 to 33.
And Deuteronomy 28 curses does not apply to them, for they were the slave ship owners of the transatlantic slave trade. The ships were not only owned by many Jews, but were manned by Jewish crews and sailed under the command of Jewish captains. Between 1492 and 1825, they were the largest ship chandlers in the entire Caribbean region, where shipping business was mainly a Jewish enterprise. Powerful financiers of one of the world's richest families procured funding for ships and prison islands for slaves.
I will also gather all nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and parted my land. Joel 3 verse 2. Because ye have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly pleasant things, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border. Behold, I will raise them out of the place whither ye have sold them, and will return your recompense upon your own head, and I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the children of Judah, and they shall sell them to the Sabaeans, to a people far off, for the Lord hath spoken it. Joel 3 verses 5 to 8.
Under the cloak of Christianity, the Berlin Conference of 1884 was set up by the European nations to meet and discuss the partitioning of the Promised Land amongst themselves in the continent of Africa. The Vatican and banking cartels also played a pivotal role in financing the expeditions and exploitations of both slavery and confiscating Africa's raw materials, such as gold, diamonds, rubber, and season of lands belonging to the indigenous people of Africa. These nations still hold sovereignty over Africa today, but not for long. Joel's Chapter 3, verse 2, prophecy reveals the enemies parting the promised land among themselves and their fate at the battle of Armageddon.
And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Deuteronomy 28, verse 68.
How can the Most High bring us into Egypt again, and by ships? In the first Exodus, our ancestors walked into Egypt, so there were no ships needed. However, we can unequivocally say that ships were used during the transatlantic slave trade, but there's only one Egypt on the map, right? No. From a spiritual standpoint, Egypt represents bondage or captivity as it relates to the Bantu people or the 12 tribes of Israel. It doesn't matter where the bondage or captivity takes place, but it does signify its personification. However, in this context, the location is a type of Babylon. If we refer back to the map of Africa in 1884, where the colonizers divided up the Most High's promised land, you will find European nations acting like Egypt once did in the days of Moses. We as a people today have awakened somewhat to realization we have been duped. We are beginning to read the Bible for ourselves, study other texts that were hidden, and now we can discern our future with clearer lens. We can now deduce with certainty that the people of the book are the black and brown people of this earth. But not all black and brown people are the seed of Jacob. Only the seed of Jacob and his 12 sons are worthy of being called the elect ones, or the 12 tribes of Israel. We can further decipher what Deuteronomy 28:68 truly means.
And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left, from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah 11 verses 11 to 12.
Just as we ponder on how the Most High was going to take Israel back into Egypt again, he has proclaimed a second time how he will again recover the remnant of his people from Egypt, as in the days of Moses. The reality is that the scramble for Africa bondage of 1884 is still alive and well in the Promised Land today. Rome is still enslaving, killing, and torturing our brothers and sisters as they labor with rigor to maintain the profits of the wealthy elites of Rome.
And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah 11 verse 12.
According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the word ensign has two meanings, but both refer to a Navy vessel. First, an ensign is a flag that is flown, as by a ship, as a symbol of nationality that may also be flown with distinctive badge added to its design. And second, it is a badge of office, rank, or power of a commissioned officer in the Navy or Coast Guard, ranking above a chief warrant officer and below a lieutenant junior grade. Does this sound like something that's only found on a ship? The Most High most likely will redeem his people by ships, considering they were taken into captivity by ships. Just like he saved Noah and his seed from the great flood by a ship, he's repeating it again. Only this time, the Most High would choose nations to facilitate this enormous undertaking, as well as ensure that the ensign or flag that would be flown on these ships symbolizes the 12 tribes of Israel. On that glorious day, every person on earth will know who we are.
And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. 2. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. 3. And shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, either reprove after the hearing of his ears. 4. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. 5. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. 6. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. 7. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. 8. And the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice' den. 9. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. 10. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. 11. And it shall come to pass in that day, that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left, from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. 12. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. 13. The envy also of Ephraim shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. 14. But they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west. They shall spoil them of the east together. They shall lay their hand upon Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall obey them. 15. And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the 7 streams, and make men go over Drishit. 16. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, which shall be left, from Assyria, like as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt.